That's it. It's 2 minutes past 11 here in South Africa. So welcome aboard to Call Center Showcase, or Contact Center Showcase, where we will share news and views about the latest tactics, techniques, and the technologies in our ever dynamic contact center space. Let's kick straight off into it and welcome my guests today, Alistair Niederer and David Taylor from Blackout Technologies in the UK. And we'll be talking about this amazing technology that I was first exposed to during my visit to the UK in September. So first off, Alistair and David, thank you for making time, sharing time with us today.
Good morning, Rod, and hi, everybody.
Morning.
Excellent. I'm going to start with you, Alistair. I know for many years, I've known you for 10 years maybe. You've been running large-scale contact center and BPO operations all over the world. Maybe just give us a bit of background on that.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. I've been involved in the BPO industry probably over 25 years. So I started much more in the back office space and moved into customer experience. So over the years, I've worked for Sutherland, Teleperformance, T-Tech, running regional operations at a C level, but always had a great interest when pre-COVID days, when spent an awful lot of time in contact centers in South Africa, in Ireland, Scotland, England, working a lot for US entities, working across Asia, particularly developing the market into the new markets in China, Southeast Asia, and of course Philippines, India. So yeah, I had a really good blast at running things.
You've been around the block with BPO, and yeah, likewise. I think I'm coming on 45 years in contact centers. But I'm sure you'll agree then that the concept of cell phones in call centers is an anathema to most contact center operators and managers. Over the last 3 or 4 months since meeting up with you guys and having a look at your offering, I've been engaging with call center managers. And it's the first thing they say is bring it on, because cell phones are a major source of security risks. And of course, the other side, which is lots of productivity, agent concentration, lack of engagement. These are the things I'm seeing. But Alistair, you've had much greater and wider experience on that. And this has no doubt been the key driver as to your involvement with Blackout.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, Rod, and I probably my 25 years is probably over 30, but I like to sound younger by saying 25. And how things have changed in the pre-COVID world, where particularly we were concerned about security, and it was always contained in bricks and mortar environments when probably only 3% of the workforce was in a work from home environment. So we were concerned about things like lockers in contact centers, and strangely enough, the most annoying things were things like having to break lockers open because of someone's sandwiches who'd become 2 weeks old, or making sure that people actually didn't smuggle their phones in, which they always will do. So security was always of prime importance. Clean desk policies. So those things have been really front of mind in terms of making sure that we had a productive, secure environment inside the workplace. But of course, work from home has opened up for all parts of life, different challenges and different requirements. But one thing I will say, Rod, that's changed a lot is our, more respect for our workforce, and it's all about making sure we have people fully engaged, fully productive, that they're secure, but they're also respected in terms of them having, access to their normal life and their world, because it's kind of very much a hybrid world now.
David, if I can bring you in here as well. You've been around the tech industry for almost 20 years, I see from your bio. Your interest in Blackout and in this approach to contact center securities, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, it's all good stuff. Excuse me. Yeah, I have a background in physics for my sins, and kind of got into mobile development quite a while ago, when that became a thing, like 10 years ago or so. Certainly Android and iOS. and it's been a bit of a passion for me. I kind of knew the company when I worked as an agency, and then kind of decided to join as CTO and bring the technology in-house. Excuse me. But yeah, we're looking at all sorts of things. So I guess pre-COVID, we were very much focused on bricks and mortar and people in office. And when COVID hit and everyone started leaving the offices, we had to think a bit more diversely about the kind of applications we can apply it to. So we still maintain the in-presence, in-office, on-premises kind of approach, but we also have really considered the work from home aspect with schedules and APIs, and also even looking at fleet operations. But contact centers still seem to be like one of the really core application areas for Blackout. So it's very important to us.
Well, I think that brings us right to the point about Blackout. And Alistair, I think, can you give us and our listeners and viewers a high-level overview of what is Blackout and how are we applying it in contact centers, and in not only contact centers, but in other trading rooms and any other areas where security is an issue. So over to you, just a high level.
Sure. I think that, Plato had a saying which has turned into necessity is the mother of invention. And, the greatest things are the simplest things. And I was really blown away when I first got introduced to Blackout. And the founder and CEO, Mark Hadley, had started the journey by looking at the situation on trading floors, and where people might have 4 or 5 screens, but they spend most of the day, it seems, on their mobile phones and probably doing a lot of personal things. So productivity, obviously an issue, and security an issue. But when Mark explained to me Blackout, I was really quite blown away by the simplicity and the logic of this thing that said, when you're in a work environment, we'd like to have your full attention. My clients' customers deserve full attention. And here is something that's come along that's enabled you to be able to block the apps that you don't want on your mobile phone. So it would remove the recording capability, the encrypted messaging, camera, all of those functions. And to me, it seemed really interesting. So the journey that Mark and Blackout and the team had been on sort of began with trading floors, then moved into the obvious advantage of Blackout in classrooms and schools, and the issues that brings to bear, and then fleets. So probably 40% of accidents in fleets, people in vans dropping off parcels, 40% of those accidents occur because they're distracted on their mobiles. So it was really interesting, and because of my background in contact centers, Mark realized that, wow, this is, in terms of volume, and contact centers is probably one of the biggest by volume. So I got involved in the company to help them with how this works very much at a ground level, and how does it impact people and operators.
If I could just elaborate a little bit, or ask you to elaborate. My understanding of the technology is that the software can control the various applications on a staff member's cell phone, and can disable, for example, cameras, recording features, etc., whilst they're in the workplace or logged into a particular work application. Is my understanding correct? Yes.
So because we're talking about generally people's personal mobiles, so as part of their employment and what would be in their employee handbook, just like they might be using a bring your own device at home, for example, then you agree that your employer for the time is able to take over the administrative control of your laptop. So it's no different from the mobile phone that says when you are stepping into your work environment, you're joining customer service calls, for example, for a retailer. When you do a move into your work environment, and administrative control of your devices is sitting with the business, it triggers through an API the app which sits on your mobile phone, which then just disables your phone from having those services disabled. But what it does do is also leaves your voice calls and your SMS on the phone, so you have still for emergency purposes. You know, it's about respecting the individual that is still going to be in contact should something drastic or urgent occur, which is, you know, one of those things I think that adds a good aspect to it. And because of the range of industries, there are different ways that we can block those apps. So we can use the API, which triggers blackout on your mobile. We can use Wi-Fi, we can use GPS, and we can use, which is also really cool, these little Bluetooth devices, which you can place in the corners of a room, and that will black you out whilst you're in that environment. So think of a big contact center. As soon as you walk in the building, and these are based around the perimeter, your mobile just moves those apps out. You can also put them in the cafeteria. So when you finish working and you have a break, you go into the cafeteria, automatically your phone is fully functioning again. And all of this stuff, Rod, is all automated. It's like download it once and then it's set up.
Well, I'm sure David's going to give us a demonstration in a few minutes, because I think we want to really see how this works when the rubber meets the road. Just on in terms of security, Alistair, maybe this is a question for you. I've had from several people when I've been talking about Blackout, is that, you know, does it meet with internationally standards for security? PCI, for example, has been thrown out. So can you expand on how the technology is applied just in the security aspect of particularly contact centers, but as you said, extending into the general workplace, trading rooms, and other areas where security is an issue?
Yeah, sure. You know, and it does, you know, conform to all of those standards that people require. And depending on the industry, whether it's financial services or retail or who the business is, you have different requirements for security. And one of the things that we're seeing a huge push and growth on is two-factor or multi-factor authentication. And so the mobile device,
that's now becoming a big issue. Is you know, does an operator allow a call center agent to use their own device for that, or are they going to be faced with having to buy other devices?
Yeah, and we do have people who are spending, you know, a couple of £100 to buy a device which they use purely for the process of two-factor authentication. So in the Blackout world, you know, we retain the apps on your mobile that will enable all of the cool features of the mobile to do the authentication by whatever means. But at the same time, you won't have access to cameras, voice recording, WhatsApp, TikTok. All of those things are not available whilst you're working.
And just before we dive into a demo, have you got some research or any stats on increase in productivity as a consequence of, you know, blacking out or blocking out social media, for example, and other distracting applications? What are your findings in that space?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob, because, you know, I typically explain Blackout as being in addition to security and compliance, but also enhancing productivity. So obviously in situations, particularly in the wrap session on calls, productivity has been shown to increase by 11% from studies, and you can go onto the Blackout website and you look at those case studies. So when you consider that this technology probably costs you around, in pounds terms, around 3.5 pence per productive hour, right? And then you look at an increase in productivity of 11%, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I can see your ROI there already, yeah. David, your time to shine. Why don't you please share with us a practical application of Blackout and demonstrate how it's applied to a user, and then also, very importantly, I'm quite sure from the administrator's perspective. So the floor is yours, David.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I would start off by showing maybe the can you see my purple screen? Just making sure I'm showing the right screen.
It's coming up.
Oh, there we go.
We've got you 95.
There we go.
That looks good.
Alistair, I think suggest that you and I kill our video just for quality of video purposes.
Okay.
David, it's all yours.
Thank you. So what I wanted to start with was a view of the kind of user experience. So what I've got is a mobile device connected up and mirrored. Has various apps installed, including the Blackout application, which doesn't do a great deal. I'll explain basically what it does. So it's basically a set of permissions that allow it to sense its environment, and another set of permissions that allows it to lock down the device. So there's lots of different mechanisms, and what I wanted to show initially, just to get the point across, is an API integration. So this is a fake desktop of some fake company called eCorp, and the idea is that when I log into this will send off an API notification to our services, and that in turn would communicate with the user's device to say they shouldn't be able to use apps again. So there we go. Suddenly YouTube is blocked and Facebook and all those kind of things. And then when that user logs out again, the reverse happens effectively. So we see a reversion to the safe mode, and there you can access everything like cameras.
So the process starts with the user installing the app onto their mobile device.
That's right.
Is there anything complex about that, or is it a straightforward download as one would off Play Store?
Yeah, so the process there, showing the admin panel, would be that we would add a user, and we can do this programmatically via the API. We can do it in bulk. We can do it as a single user here, and that would then send off an email to that user with a download link to the Play Store or the App Store, including a one-off code. So the good thing is that the users don't need to manage username and passwords. They just need this one-off code, and then the app and the system keep that code up to date, and so that you can maintain that security and reference between the device and the user.
I see. So the screen we're looking at now, this would be the typical administrator screen. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So this is the user management side of the devices. So you can see these are my devices that I've got set up, and it's all kind of semi live. So for example, if I were to be naughty, one of the things you can do in the app is to manually disable it, and we can turn off this feature per organization, but it's to allow people to break out if there's an emergency or they need to contact someone using a different mechanism. And this will get flagged on our system. So that's kind of done a little thing. So now if I block them, it won't work. But you'll see semi-real time, last 3 seconds, it kind of flags it to the system that this device is in a risky state, and so you can basically track whether users are compliant and whatnot. So that's
this being a dashboard, does it have any functionality for auto escalations or alarming, so that an administrator is not sitting staring at the screen all day looking for companies?
Yeah, that's something that we're doing at the moment, trying to put in kind of a notification center so that you can decide how you want to be notified, whether it's email or whether you just want daily updates on compliance generally, all those kind of things. But if I go a bit deeper, so this is kind of user management and devices. Now I want to talk about the rules somewhat. So what I showed there was a custom API integration, and we're looking at developing a roadmap of built-in integrations with with things that are commonly used, so HR platforms and time management platforms and things like that, which and including Active Directory is something we're looking at the moment, so that you can sync your users with your back office side of things, and then also determine which applications trigger those blocking events. But we also have some out-of-the-box blocking mechanisms, so we can have schedules, just set date and time, decide which teams those rules apply to. We have the beacons that Alistair showed.
Can you expand on the beacons as opposed to the API, or the differences and the applications of both the beacons and the API?
Yeah, sure. So I guess these rules came first. So we kind of have the concept of how I like to think about it is time and space rules. So time obviously being the schedules, and then space being the geophysical things that you can define. So Bluetooth beacons are passive. Well, they're active, but from a mobile side, they're passive. You don't need to connect to them. You can just place beacons around an area that you're interested in blocking or unblocking. And they have a unique ID, which the mobile phone registers and the operating system looks out for on the app's behalf, effectively. So they're small Bluetooth, much like Bluetooth headphones or something. They use the same power output and protocols, but they're like 50-meter range kind of tops, depending on the environment, like walls and people. So you would tend to do a bit of a site survey and work out how best to place these things in a office environment.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers your question.
That's the beacons, yeah.
That's the beacons.
Wi-Fi regions.
And then Wi-Fi's we set up with just the SSIDs of the things, and then the mobile phones can look out for those Wi-Fi's either connecting to them or in the presence of. And then GPS is just a geofence thing, so you can, if you've got a large site or campus, or we were talking to a mining company the other day, if you can imagine a large area that Wi-Fi or beacons aren't really appropriate for, you can define these large areas with basically a lat and long and a radius.
I saw your video clip about using this technology in schools. That was fascinating. Would you use then the GPS region to give a coverage across a whole school campus?
Yeah, potentially. Again, it's kind of like we have a whole bunch of kind of a toolbox of mechanisms for sensing and blocking people. So it may be that a school decides that their schedule is good enough. They have well-defined breaks and lunch times, and then they could use something like beacons to unblock people in certain labs. Maybe they have a computing lab where mobile devices are allowed or something. So it really is horses for courses. Different environments require different mechanisms.
So if my understanding is correct, then with the beacons, it can block or unblock. So you can define an area. If you walk into it, you become blocked, or alternatively, an area is defined as open. So as you walk into the canteen, it opens.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can imagine layering these things up. So if you have a large area that's blocked by a geofence like this, but then within that you can set some rules to say unblock if you're in this area. So yeah, it's kind of geofence is kind of a blunt instrument, and beacons are much more surgical.
Targeting. Fascinating. Yeah. We have a nice question come in from Craig, and it's something been bugging me as well. Craig says, does the app allow users to disable the permissions in the settings functionality on the device itself?
Great question.
And what's the scenario then?
Yeah, so our app works on like bring your own devices primarily. So in essence, the user is always in control. They're like the top admin of their own devices. So we can't fully stop them from doing anything, including uninstalling the app or turning off location services, for example. But what we can do is report that back to the system as a flag. So we have a whole bunch of triggers that can alert the admins to say this user's non-compliant because they've turned off their location permission. And so there's still somewhat an element of trust, but you can also look back in time and say, was the user compliant at this point when we think there was an issue or a problem? We see that particularly important in the kind of fleet scenario. If someone has an accident and then they quickly re-enable all their permissions after being on YouTube while driving. So then you can kind of not blame, but you can say, well, we think the user was in a risky situation at this point in time.
You mentioned fleets and vehicles, and drivers in vehicles, etc. How is the technology applied in that case in a moving vehicle?
Yeah, so we have a similar approach. We've been developing our own beacons, which are motion sensitive. So basically, you would assign a beacon, one of these special beacons, with a vehicle, and there's that one-to-one relationship. So a driver can get in, set up their device, and as they go off down the road, that beacon will start emitting a signal because it senses the movement, and then the rest of our system would work as intended, and it would recognize that there's a beacon. It'll communicate to our servers and block the device. But there's other mechanisms, and we're looking at other integrations with telematics providers. So there are situations where we don't need extra hardware in the vehicle. Like if there's something already existing, we can either use its own intrinsic beacon capabilities, or even if it's a connected system, we can use server to server comms. Yeah, to say.
I can see insurance companies being very interested in this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's one of our big interests as well at the moment.
Any other features you'd like us to share with us on this time, Dave?
Yeah, so at the moment, I guess the main thing is, well, one small thing is that we have the concept of tags, which are kind of, we can apply to different rules and different users, so you can split up your team however you want, and different rules can apply to different people. And we also have a full developer area so that people can create keys to integrate with our system, and we have full-on API documentation, so people can read about how to integrate with our system. One of the things we're doing at the moment is so that would be a custom integration from the customer side, and what we're looking at now as kind of a priority is that off-the-shelf integrations, so that we can really reduce the friction of someone with an existing software platform and using triggers from that to say this user's logged in now, blah blah blah. So we're talking to people like ThinScale, Time Doctor, and I mentioned Active Directory, and various things for integrating user synchronization. So if people come and go, you don't need to manually edit the user table. It'll all just work natively. So yeah, I think
very exciting. Can I bring Alistair? Can I bring you back in again? Thanks for that, David. We might come back and have some questions on that. Alistair, how does a typical engagement with a potential customer, how does it start, and what are the processes that you would follow?
Yeah, Rod, it's I think now what's happened, and what I'm seeing a lot of, is that those people that are working with their service providers have now become aware that this technology is available, right? And what they are doing is saying for for their security requirements, their compliance requirements, excuse me, that, you know, Blackout exists. So it's something you don't want to be ignoring, because it absolutely does enhance security and compliance, particularly in the work from home environment. So we're seeing a push for people saying that, you know, they would like their service providers to implement the Blackout technology. I think that's kind of going to be a no-brainer. And of course, anything new takes a while for people to get to understand the implications and then to move forward. So working with those people who are providing bring your own device and laptop admin control sort of features for security, it's no different from the personal mobile device. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of that, and we're also seeing those users who are ahead of the demand. You know, I guess the more innovation savvy BPOs, for example, are now implementing Blackout because they understand it's not only does it assist them with winning new business because they've got greater levels of security and compliance, but it's actually a win because they are getting increased productivity at the same time. So that's where we're seeing most of the growth.
I'd also, if you wouldn't mind, like you to expand on a typical work from home scenario. We have agents deployed in their own home environments, and how would the technology be applied practically in that case?
Yeah, as Dave's demonstrated, it's, you know, it really can be managed to a great extent by the person who's employing you, because part of your workplace management and your handbook for your employee handbook, the terms and conditions would say that we would like you to be able to install Blackout as whilst you're in the work environment, just the same as they would for a BYOD laptop. So when they're onboarded, then it's just part of the process that says we use Blackout to block apps while you're in the work environment. Here's how it works. Here's the situations that we don't. You know, there's a thing called, believe it or not, nomophobia, which is about people's fear of not having access to the world on their mobiles. And that's if you're putting a phone in a locker for 8 hours and you've got kids at school or those sorts of things, you want to know that you're still within reach. So, you know, once you go through and explain the pluses and minuses and how this operates, that's typically how it works. And the only thing that we're seeing pushback and objections is saying, well, people might have a second phone. And that's the concept of the bad actors in society, because even in a normal contact center, people have, you know, spy glasses, they can use, you know, pen cameras, they can bring these things along. So, you know, for the good actors, for most people, they know that they're secure in the knowledge that their phone is audibly blacked out whilst they've been in a work environment, and they can't do these sorts of things.
Okay, makes good sense. Anybody of our guests online at the moment, would you like to pose any other questions specifically to either Alistair or David, or would you like to see some practical demonstration of a feature? Nathaniel, can I bring you in live, standing by? There we go, we have Nathaniel. You muted. There we go, you're live.
Hi, thanks. I think I accidentally refreshed my screen there. Didn't quite. No, I was just wondering.
You've gone mute. Nathaniel, you've gone mute.
Oh, sorry, I didn't
There you go, you're back.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Okay. No, based on everything that you've been saying, in terms of monitoring the application as a user, what protections are there in place to ensure that when I'm outside of these working hours that I'm not being tracked, or concerns around what my employer can see on my device when I'm outside of work, for example. I mean, is that something I need to worry about, or is that what type of information are you collecting on me?
Oh, nice question. Very nice question. Who's going to answer that? Alistair, David?
I can go. So yeah, it is. You can see how users may be concerned about the kind of permissions we would ask for on the mobile phone installation. And it kind of depends on what aspects of the dashboard you're using. So if it's API only, we can forego asking for location permissions, for example, because we can assume that the users won't need them, and because we don't need to detect against them. So there's things like that where we can really simplify it. But in the case where we do need things like beacons or geofences where location permissions are required, we were really conscious about this point. So what we actually do is we don't collect lat and long, we don't collect location specifically. What we do is we collect when you come into contact with these things which are already on the system. So if you go into the office, we can record we've seen him enter the office, we've seen him leave the office, and record those on our dashboard. So yeah, it is a good point, and I can see how it would be concerning, but all we can do is reassure people that this is what we do, this is the data we collect, and we have very strict data retention policies and things which can be modified by an organization. So yeah, that fine level data we only intend to keep for I'd have to check things, but like 14 days or something, and then but we keep some of the other things for longer. So yeah, it really depends on what the specific requirements of the org are in terms of those data retention bits and bobs.
Got it.
Yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Daniel, does that answer the question? Any further feedback needed?
No, that's pretty spot on. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Nathaniel.
Right. Any other questions coming in from the floor? I've got a couple of emails come in here as well. We've answered the question about if a user deletes the app. Of course, then we start getting flags, etc. Now, the onboarding process, and I'm assuming there's a sort of a change management protocol that you're using at the moment when you're installing or deploying on a new site. Alistair, is that your question?
Yeah, I think as a previous operator working extensively with the HR department, we're very particular always about what is required of our workforce, and where attrition and retention, all of these things are really important, and above all else, having a great employee experience. So I think it's mostly about setting the expectations around what Blackout is in a work from home environment. Again, it's about how you go through the process of onboarding, and if it's a BYOD or if somebody is supplying a device for you at home, then there is an employee handbook which walks you through these things. So typically in those early training sessions, you explain what Blackout is and how it operates, why it still gives you access in emergency conditions, versus a lot of situations where people are in their handbook saying that you must turn off your mobile phone, you must put it in a bottom drawer, bring it back in. The plus side of this is that you don't actually, once you've downloaded the app and once you've become enabled, you don't have to do anything. So it works automatically for you. So there's no extra work involved. So it's nothing more than setting the expectations, explaining what it gives and gives back, and then off you go.
If we look at both sides of the way in which some of the securities are handled, the cell phones mandatory locked away in a locker versus you can have your cell phone on your desk, but we're blocking out certain applications. Alistair, have you seen the difference in productivity between a workforce that is mandated to put all their cell phones away in the locker versus those that are comfortable sitting at the desk, or the organization's comfortable about the security arrangements? But what is the impact on that agent? Do we see an increase in productivity?
Yeah, overall, and this is in not from a work from home environment. The studies we've done have been in a brick and mortar environment, in a large scale contact center, where we've seen an increase in productivity of 11%. that relates to probably 25 work days equivalent across a year. So you can understand the value to a business, and where we're seeing the most of that is in the wrap time. So it's not that time when you're working with an agent particularly, it's when you're finished your call, you're going through the wrap period, and then you're picking up the next call or the next contact. So most of it we're seeing in that point when you're kind of in that mode where you can go on and go on YouTube or WhatsApp or answer your messages, because if you're being paid to work in that hour, and during that hour you're taking the opportunity to do a few other personal things, that's where we're seeing the productivity.
Okay, excellent. I don't see any other questions coming through, but Alistair, I think if you can just start expanding on the commercials, the licensing models, without going into specific costs, but what is the mechanism for deployment?
Yeah, there's two parts to it. There's the integration of the user group, the company, to integrate with Blackout. If they've chosen API, for example, then what they're doing is working with Blackout to make that integration possible. If it's things like scheduling, if it's using beacons, a lot of the other areas, it's a different case. And it really depends on the technology that the business uses. Many people already have other administrative control apps on their laptops, which already we have API integrations. So it's relatively straightforward, and there's not a lot of development time required. It may be in some companies, they need a week of time to provide the API integration and to do that. If they're using a third party to do the administrative control of their laptops, then they probably already have that API integration in place. And then the commercial model in terms of its usage, then typically it's a per user per month model. And as I said earlier, it works out to be around 3.5 pence, 3.25 pence per productive hour. So you can see that's it's really not a lot.
Excellent. And then time to deploy, typically from
I'll let David take that one.
Getting through the commercial. Say again, repeat.
David's going to take that one in terms of what he's done, and he can give a more accurate answer.
Yeah, well, if commercials aside, it's pretty quick to deploy. I guess some of the non-technical aspects are more around kind of engaging with the workforce, letting them know what's going to happen, so that they're not surprised by suddenly getting an email from Blackout. Or co-branded with the contact center. So yeah, that kind of pre-engagement side of things. If there's a site survey required, if we need to do any provide any custom support for API integrations, as Alistair suggested. But once all those things are out of the way, it's as quick as inviting a couple of admins on the contact center side, giving them a bit of training, and uploading or linking to the user groups to send those invites out.
I think the question just comes through. Thanks, Nick, for putting that one in there. And he asked, can you see who has installed and not installed the app? And throw that back at you, David. I'm sure from an admin perspective. The second part of it, you can answer it maybe in context, is can we do bulk uploads of enrollments of 200 or 300 or 400 staff members, for example?
Yeah, so as I say, we can either link with an HR system or Active Directory or something like that to get those users and to send invites out, or the company can export a CSV of users and we can import that and bulk contact users. In terms of the rollout, that's a useful one. Like on our dashboard, we have during the onboarding process, we have a couple of donut charts to show how many people that you've invited have actually gone through the whole process and things like that. So yeah, if someone's someone's ignoring those emails and just hasn't installed the app, you can track and find out who those people are. So we have various statuses like invited and claimed, which is when they've taken the code that we've given them, and then fully registered, so we can track that flow through the onboarding pipeline and whatnot. So,
excellent.
Yeah,
another question from Craig. Craig, can I bring you in live to ask your question of the guys? There you go. You're live. Just unmute.
Morning, guys. So my question is, if a contact center currently has a locker approach, where staff are required to lock up their mobile devices when entering the premises, to where the Blackout app has now been installed, have you seen any change in productivity with staff now having access to their mobile devices during the day versus having no access previously? Have there been any studies in this area?
Yes, there have been studies, Craig, and that's what I think I mentioned. The case study is on the Blackout website, which showed an improvement in contact center of 11%.
Okay, so my understanding was that the 11% was based on staff that had access previously to their devices during the day, but I'm more concerned, or my question is surrounding where there's a locker type of approach.
Yeah, the people in that study previously would have had their phone in a locker. Then through the proof of concept, they were able to retain the limited functionality, but retain their mobile phone. And in this case, they were required. It was so much more beneficial to have two-factor authentication and have the device available to do that, so that you know that you're actually dealing with the right person. And then the productivity gain across that day, whilst having the phone in a blackout mode, allowed them that greater productivity.
Awesome. Thanks, Alistair.
Thanks for the question, Craig. I don't see any other questions coming up from the floor. David, are there any particular questions which in your previous engagements with clients or interested parties that we haven't addressed in today's session? Any features that maybe you'd like to expand on?
I guess one thing is that we mentioned MDMs, and so kind of there's a corporate-owned device can be like properly locked down. Like you can determine what sites are available, what apps are available, all those kind of things. But when it comes to personal devices, you can only really do a light touch, maybe like remote wipe and a few other bits and bobs. And we found, while experimenting with trying to do dynamic MDM usage, so do what we do but with an MDM, we found that you can't really do that. You can't switch between a high security and a low security mode on a personal device. So you kind of have to choose a level which both the employee and the company are happy with on that personal device. And I have to say I wouldn't like that kind of thing on my own device. So yeah, you can't stop them from using WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever else on their own device if it's set like that 100% of the time. So I guess what the benefit of Blackout and those and bring your own devices in particular allows you to do that modulation between high focus and fully unlocked to do whatever they want with. So I think that's one of the main appeals, really, is that modulation.
Okay. Alistair, anything that we haven't covered today that you'd like to expand on? And also in the same question is, what now? If anybody's interested in progressing it further, one-on-one demonstrations or more information, over to you, Alistair.
Yeah, I mean, I think, each organization has, different view of how they do this, but typically we would recommend a proof of concept at the front end. Of course, that can be using different technologies. You may not need to deploy the API straight up, but certainly to become familiar with something that's not been in existence before, I think it's good for the management of the organization, for the technology, to the business developers. Remembering that this gives an operator a competitive advantage, because they're offering, certainly they're offering an ability to provide greater security and compliance. They also understand the economics of it, show a positive, but it's just getting used to that. And I think there are stakeholders in a business would like to see this in operation. So we're more than happy to work through proof of concepts as we go through. That's a relatively short process. Perhaps it's with 20 users or 10 users or whatever, or wherever. So geographically, it doesn't really matter. So yes, we're always open to that. I think that the concept is relatively straightforward. There may be some technical intricacies based on how we would like to deploy.
Excellent. And are you the point of contact for anybody interested in carrying this forward? Because I see we also have a couple of interested parties who may well be looking to become resellers or partners.
Yeah, by all means. I'm a non-exec director of Blackout, and I'm happy to take the front end on anything, particularly in my space. So I'm not a specialist in fleet or schools or mining sites, but certainly in contact centers. So I can help people with the concept from somebody inside of the industry who'd like to understand what this looks like. There's some very good presentation decks. We explain the API process, or go to blackout-technologies.com. I'm sure we'll show that up somewhere where people can go on. They can look at the white papers. They can look at some of the case study work and all of the understanding. So there's a wealth of good information there, but very happy for people to reach out at any time.
Excellent. Thank you for that. As I mentioned at the outset, I'll be doing an edited version of this session today. I'll include in it the various contact details, also the links to the website and any other collateral. So I'll output that. I'll mail it to everybody that's registered. And otherwise, you can always get back to me and I will facilitate the introduction. So to everybody who's been on the call today, thank you so much for giving time and sharing it with us. And the guys, Nathaniel, Craig, and the rest for really nice questions. David, thanks for a great demo and responses back to our guests. And Alistair, thank you for your inputs as well. So
welcome.
Further ado, thank you, everybody. And I think, as they say in the movie industry, that's a wrap. So have a great day. And
thanks for your time.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
Great
Bye, everybody.
For the weekend. Bye-bye.